Coming up on 5 Minute News. Democrats stop Texas GOP's sweeping voting restrictions. China easing birth limit to further cope with aging society. And study blames climate change for 37% of global heat deaths. It's Tuesday, June 1. I'm Anthony Davis. Texas Democrats pulled off a dramatic last-ditch walkout in the state House of Representatives to block passage of one of the most restrictive voting bills in the U.S., leaving Republicans with no choice but to abandon a midnight deadline and declare the legislative session essentially over. The revolt was one of Democrats' biggest protests to date against GOP efforts nationwide to impose stricter election laws, and they used the spotlight to urge President Joe Biden to act on voting rights. But the victory may be fleeting. Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who had declared new voting laws a priority in Texas, quickly announced he would order a special session to finish the job. He called the failure of the bill deeply disappointing, but did not say when he would drag lawmakers back to work. We've said for so many years that we want more people to participate in our democracy, and it just seems that's not the case, said Democratic State Representative Carl Sherman. One by one, Democrats left the House chamber until there was no longer the 100-member quorum needed to pass Senate Bill 7, which would have reduced polling hours, empowered poll watchers, and scaled back ways to vote in Texas, which already has some of the nation's most limiting voting laws. They gathered later outside a black church, driving home their anger over a last-minute change to the Texas bill that would have prohibited Sunday voting before 1 p.m., when many black worshippers go to the polls. Democrats said they did not go into the House vote intending to break quorum, but instead became fed up after Republicans repeatedly refused to take their questions while racing to pass the bill. Across the U.S., Republicans are increasingly attempting to make voting more difficult in a last-bid attempt to reduce Democratic votes in future elections. Trump supporters, who back his false claim that the 2020 vote was rigged, are running to become the top election officials in some key states. The campaign set up the possibility that politicians who have taken steps to undermine faith in the American democratic system could soon be the ones running it. China's ruling Communist Party said on Monday it will ease birth limits to allow all couples to have 3 children instead of 2, in hopes of slowing the rapid aging of its population, which is adding to strains on the economy and society. The ruling party has enforced birth limits since 1980 to restrain population growth, but worries the number of working-age people is falling too fast, while the share over the age of 65 is rising. That threatens to disrupt its ambitions to transform China into a prosperous consumer society and global technology leader. Leaders also agreed China needs to raise its retirement age to keep more people in the workforce and improve pension and health services for the elderly. Restrictions that limit most couples to 1 child were eased in 2015 to allow 2, but the total number of births fell further, suggesting rule changes on their own have little impact on the trend. Couples say they are put off by high costs of raising a child, disruption to their jobs, and the need to look after elderly parents. China, along with Thailand and some other Asian economies, faces what economists call the challenge of whether they can get rich before they get old. The Chinese population of 1.4 billion already was expected to peak later this decade and start to decline. Census data released on May 11 suggests that it's happening faster than expected, adding to burdens on underfunded pension and health systems, and cutting the number of future workers available to support a growing retiree group. More than 1/3 of the world's heat deaths each year are due directly to global warming, according to the latest study to calculate the human cost of climate change. But scientists say that's only a sliver of climate's overall toll. Even more people die from other extreme weather, amplified by global warming, such as storms, flooding and drought, and the heat death numbers will grow exponentially with rising temperatures. Dozens of researchers who looked at the heat deaths in 732 cities around the globe from 1991 to 2018 calculated that 37% were caused by higher temperatures from human-caused warming, according to a study yesterday in the journal Nature Climate Change. That amounts to around 9,700 people a year from just those cities, but it's much more worldwide, the study's lead author says. Sao Paulo, Brazil, has the most climate-related heat deaths, averaging 239 a year. About 35% of heat deaths in the United States can be blamed on climate change, the study found. That's a total of more than 1,100 deaths a year in about 200 cities, topped by 141 in New York. You can subscribe to 5-Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5-Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5-Minute News is an Evergreen Podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.